great. So, Professor Yates, you are in the camera now. Looks very good. So, I'm meeting Professor Yates after some time officially. I have known him for more than 10 years now. So, it's good to meet him at AGS today in center of Paris. Professor Yates, thank you very much for giving your time to me. So, for the benefit of my viewers, you are connected online now on Facebook Live. Can you kindly introduce your specialty and about yourself?
Sure. So I'm an American political scientist, and I did my doctoral work at Boston University on Gabon.
Okay.
And so I started coming to France to do research on French Africa, and I settled here about 25 years ago. So I've been teaching political science and international relations in American University of Paris, American Graduate School, and also I teach English and American law within the French university system at the Université de Cergy-Pontoise. My research concentration has been Africa, and my specialty has been oil in Africa, something known as the oil curse, the resource curse. So I've published 6 books, about a dozen articles, about a dozen chapters in books, and scores of reviews in this orbit of subjects, either with France and Africa, Africa and resources.
And you publish in English only or in?
I've published in English. Every now and then I'll publish an article here or there in French, but increasingly you can write in English even for non-English journals. It's become something of the Latin of our modern age.
Okay, but I have a kind of personal question. Now you are like a professor with all kind of entitlement in United States, but now you have been living and working here almost full time. So what is the reason or what is the logic?
Well, when I was in the U.S., I started studying international relations, the international system. So I always had an interest in moving out of the U.S. and living overseas. France happens to be just such a wonderful place that it's become my home base. But since I've been living here in France, I've had the chance to travel around the world, Asia, South Asia, East Asia, throughout Africa, Latin America. So France is very well connected. It's something of a hub that it's very well connected to the rest of the world. But for my specialty, Africa, France is particularly well located. This is a place, Paris, where not only do you have direct access to 18 countries in Africa that are French-speaking countries that have their principal trade diplomatic relations here, but also it's a country that cares a lot about Africa, that pays attention to it. So if you're doing research on Africa, you have the libraries here, you have the embassies here, you have a huge number of African students and professors who come here. It's the center of a publishing industry that has its eye on Africa. So it's a very good place for studying sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, so now this is kind of a question related to me, my kind of fans also. Now, first of all, very quick question. Now, what is your experience in Sri Lanka since you were there some time ago?
Well, my only and unique personal experience in Sri Lanka was visiting with you a series of very fine business schools and international relations centers where I was invited to give lectures on what was then the Obama administration, just to date this. And I was amazed at what I saw in Colombo by the mixture of the high tech at the time. Its connectivity put places like France to shame with enormous banyan trees and vines and all of that cultural effusion. And I know one of my ambitions has been to return and go to see Kandy. To go on that. But I had an older history with Sri Lanka, which was indirect through my father. My father had written a television movie called The Black Panther of Ceylon. And this had been done when he was at the Disney Corporation. And if you ever go on IDB, which is the internet site for movies, you can see his credit, William Yates, the Black Panther of Ceylon. And so from my infancy, I had had in the back of my mind this wonderful exotic place, but it was in visiting that I realized it's cutting edge and has a real future in this world of internet.
Okay, thank you very much for the very high and positive remarks and also your personal connections. Now, there are also people who are like interested and who want to come to study and like even do some study visit in Paris and France. So why people from say Sri Lanka or South Asia should come to France, not maybe to England or US? Why Paris?
Well, it's funny. Of course, I think it's good if you come to France to take that opportunity to visit other Western European countries, because everything is connected not only by a great train grid, but increasingly by low-cost flights. And even now, today, before Brexit, you can travel around the European Union without a lot of problems for visas. So France is a hub. At first, it's connected by high-speed trains. You can be in Brussels, for example, the capital of Europe, in an hour and 15 minutes. You can be in Luxembourg in an hour and 15 minutes. You can be in Germany in an hour and a half, in Italy in 2 hours. And in Britain, you can come from Paris with the Channel. You get on a train, you come out in central London an hour and a half later with an hour time lag. So one of the reasons to come to France is precisely it's one of the main capital cities of Europe. But then there's other things. So French culture is a specificity, and there's been an effort to internationalize French culture. So coming to France gives you an alterité to the Anglophone hegemony that exists in the world. And so they've often positioned themselves as offering another vision of Western civilization besides Uncle Sam. And they're very open to doing business, to having state-to-state relations, but in a different way. Let me give a concrete example. If you're doing military relations, you might want to deal with the US, but if you're doing culture, science, education, France is the place that invented ministries of culture, created UNESCO, and all of the World Heritage sites are harnessed here, all of the Education for All programs. This is the place in France where you get your famous literacy studies. France as well is one of the two core countries of Europe, of the European Union. And its diplomatic efforts are becoming increasingly important in a world that's being divided by nationalism. France is a member of the Security Council, the P5. It's a major intervener in peace operations around the world, and particularly offers a forum for diplomatic talks as a third-party state that, while it's a great power, is not a superpower. So it offers a forum for China, for Russia, for the United States. And then, of course, there's, well, more pleasurable things like the food, the history, the culture. It's the #1 country in the world for tourism, and it's not an accident. France has so much to offer, so much variety. So coming to Paris is also a starting point, a port of entry to the various regions of France, from beautiful Mediterranean down on the south, where you have Nice and Marseille, to the rugged coast of Brittany with its Breton culture, to the Alps, where Mount Blanc, the tallest mountain in Europe, is located with its snow-covered peaks, up towards Picardy and Lille, or to the east to Alsace. Each of these areas are cultures that have a cuisine, an architecture, and a history that provide a great richness, including some of the most ancient art in the world at Lascaux Caves.
So there are a lot of reasons for people to think about France as their living, working, and studying destination. Now, I have to apologize to you because you are like an international media person. I have seen you in French 24 and other channels. So actually, I'm particularly thank you for you giving me an interview for my personal friends and fans. My final question may be on your ideas about American politics, particularly about the new policies of President Trump.
Yeah, so ever since the end of World War II, the United States has been building an international system. an international marketplace of global commerce, global trade through what we call the Bretton Woods institutions. Separate from American military power, there's this part of American influence with, say, the United States dollar being the world reserve currency, the International Monetary Fund providing standby relief to countries that are in balance crises, the World Bank trying to promote development, and most important of all, the World Trade Organization, which has created a truly global regime for world trade. And the current administration is breaking all of the China in the shop. It is truly undermining the post-war economic order that the United States has spent over half a century trying to build. Why? There are different answers. Certainly the U.S. doesn't appear to be alone in this shift in mentality. But my theory is that globalization has produced winners and losers. And right now what we're seeing is the vengeance of the losers of globalization. They're angry. Okay. They feel marginalized. They're suffering from relative poverty. And so populists and demagogues like Donald Trump are harvesting all that miscontent. And yet, if their analysis of the problem is right, their solutions are false. And they're leading us potentially on the path to war.
Also, you mentioned during our last discussion about this new group of people who don't kind of listen to reason and logic. It's difficult to explain to them. You also mentioned some term. Can you kind of repeat that?
Well, there's people who are being called flat earthers.
Right.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult to imagine that in a country that has access to live streaming images of planet Earth, that is the round object that we live on, that they would believe the Earth is flat. And I've had a very hard time reconciling this because these are the same people who deny that global warming is happening, or if it's happening, that human effects are causing it, or that the fisheries are dying out, or that we're using up our arable land, we're deforesting the last sources that we have of carbon-consuming forestry. So you have people who are in denial of reality, and I've had a hard time figuring out what this is. And for a while I thought, of course, well, they're just stupid. But it's not really a good answer. And I think what it is that they're so mad that they're going to stubbornly insist on things that are false as a way of saying, fuck you, to the elites. And they'll go, yeah, the Earth is flat, fuck you. And you can go to your red in the face offering them proof, scientific evidence, arguments. That just makes them laugh because they don't care anymore. They're so bitter and disappointed, and many of them strung out on opiates. Their lives are a wreck. And they don't care if the Earth's flat or not, so they're going to say it's flat. And that's their empowerment, is their ability to tell all of the experts, I don't care about what you think. The problem is we need to deal with real problems in the world. And having some common agreement on a factual reality is necessary to make the tough decisions of policy. And so we have to find a way of recognizing their anger, but not validating their denial of truth. Because we've been sitting on things like climate change now for 25 years, and Trump supporters, pulling out of the Paris Accord isn't doing anyone any service.
Now, this is very, very valid because I have been actually kind of exploring this idea of flat earthers to apply to Sri Lankan context, because we had, last regime by Mahinda Rajapaksa, which was defeated by public opinion. But now he's still the most popular politician, and their kind of group and gang is coming back based on that kind of argument. We can't say logic, but that kind of trend or the flat earthers idea. So what are the options we have, how to kind of overcome these political realities of flat earthers?
Right, so to get people back onto the Enlightenment project, which involves things like reason and science and truth, we have to have a system that doesn't marginalize and exclude the majority of mankind. that is our economic system is increasingly concentrating wealth in such a tiny group of people who are lavishly displaying their well-being while others are declining, not only in relative terms, but now in absolute terms, that the inequality of our system has to be addressed so that these people see some reason to get back on board the Enlightenment project. I feel a lot of things that were about creating world peace were hijacked to create profit. No better example than the European Union. The European Union was created to create lasting peace in Europe, where there had been half a millennium of war between these nation states. And in the 1990s, it was hijacked by neoliberals to make a currency, and the tremendous poverty, the outsourcing of jobs, the destruction of traditional forms of income has even happened here in Western Europe, one of the wealthiest regions of the world. So to get people back on board the Enlightenment project, we have to deal with inequality, not just in Europe, not just in the United States, but globally. And this will involve a variety of reforms to the world financial order in particular, which is allowing people to take money and hide it offshore, not make their fair contribution, and to create a world where fewer and fewer people have meaningful employment and the ability to meet their needs, and where the environment is being destroyed in some things like the climate beyond the point of no return. So we've got to address the economic issues, I think, to bring people back to the cultural issues, like treating migrants and people of other races and religions fairly, to bring them to reasonable politics of compromise. But as long as we have an economic system that is just vacuuming the wealth from 99% and hurling it on what are now the world's first trillionaires, then how can we expect people to have an honest debate about anything? 3 people in America own as much as the bottom 50% of the population. This isn't a marginal problem of distribution. This is a catastrophe. The world needs no trillionaires.
Yeah, but I agree on that. But now, for example, at least in developing country context, whether it is Sri Lanka or South Asia or any other region, but we also have the problems of, like, say, religion, ethnicity, such identity politics also are kind of powerful, let's say, movements. So beyond the economical equality, what about the kind of, say, traditional such kind of problems?
Okay, so not to make too much of a segue, but I do believe when people are having a hard time, they're going to have a struggle. They're going to try to say, why am I suffering? Who's responsible? And what's to be done? And usually people will find some other to blame. Now that could be religious, or in some cases ethnic, or based on caste. I think the man who's given the best explanation is the Nobel Prize winning author Amartya Sen. And his argument is that you have political entrepreneurs who sell you on a false singular identity. They say you're Sikh, or you're Muslim, or you're Hindu, or you're Buddhist, and they reduce your entire complex personality to a single identity. But the truth is, for example, I'm a man, I'm white, I'm English speaking, I'm American. I have many identities besides my religion. And so what creates violence is when political entrepreneurs convince you your entire identity can be reduced to a single dimension. And therefore the solution, and this is what Sen offers, is when you're in a conflict, say about religion, where they're saying, you're Buddhist, I'm Hindu. What you do is you find the things you have in common. Like, do you like Indian food? Do you like Dilma tea? Do you like tea or coffee? And, you know, who's your favorite author? What music do you like? Are you an Apple person? Are you a Microsoft person? Do you like a bicycle? Are you gay? Are you straight? You have so many dimensions to your personality that you can find the commonality with other people. But if you isolate everything on a single identity, then they become an irreconcilable other. So his solution, the great book is called Identity and Violence. His solution is, the truth is, we're a multitude of complex mixture of identities, and the path to peace is by embracing the diversity of our identities and therefore finding commonality with others.
So thank you very much. It was really pleasure, and actually I have a lot of things to ask you and discuss with you, but due to the time and also your schedule and busyness, I want to discontinue here. But any last comments, last things you want to share with my fans?
Well, yeah, I mean, I really believe that Sri Lanka for decades was treated as the conflict case study, and for all of the problems that are occurring there, one thing is true: Sri Lanka's had a brief reprieve from endless civil war, and hopefully that's an opportunity to peace build, not just to have the absence of violence, but to start to deal with the underlying structural inequalities that were the cause of that. By being multicultural, by respecting the minorities' rights to their language, their religion, by being democratic, you can build a lasting peace and not simply create an endless cycle of return to violence.
Thank you, Professor Yates. Thank you very much.